My name is Goldman. I'm the director and founder of Goldman and Associates. Our firm has a primary focus on family law issues here in Michigan. And today we're going to continue our video series designed to educate and inform the public, so please subscribe to our channel. When we talk about divorces and the division of assets, we really are talking about the division of marital assets, which could include a lot of things. I mean, it could include a house, a car, items of personal property. It could include heirloom type things, things that are near and dear to you. The question becomes, what do we do if it happens to include a business? And how is a business handled with respect to the dissolution of marital assets? Well, number one, if the business was either started during the marriage or was continued during the marriage, it's something to be considered with respect to the division of assets. It's definitely in play. Even if the business was started 15 years before the marriage, but if it's ongoing and growing and improving and changing and generating income, it's a valuable asset. And if that asset is generating that income during the marriage, though started before, it's still something that we have to take into account when we evaluate the distribution of assets. The question becomes how to do it. And what is the business really worth? So if you backtrack it, and you say, okay, the business is worth $1 million. The marital portion of the business is worth $1 million. So therefore, we're going to divide it up 500 to 1,000 apiece. That becomes simple. But in order to get to that place, though, there's a lot that has to happen. First of all, we have to figure out what part of the business, in a business that was started before the marriage, what part of that is really separate property. In other words, what was the value of the asset before the marriage? And then how much did it increase in value during the marriage? The increased value, that would be the thing that we'd be focusing on. That would be the marital asset. Now, sometimes the business is such that depending on how many partners there are and this and that, you know, and when it was started, and sometimes business has different iterations and it starts out as one thing, ends up something else. You can see how that could complicate the calculation as to what part of it is premarital and what part is marital. Another thing you have to consider is there's different ways of determining the value of a business. I had a client once tell me that he thought that the value of a business is how much money the business makes versus how much money the business spends. Well, that may or may not be the case. That net, depending on how it's manipulated, could really change the value of the business. So for example, let's say a business makes $1 million a year. If it spends $1 million a year, the business really has no value. That is to say, all the money that it brings in, it spends on various expenses, and those expenses may include salary, and the salary may include the salary of those people who are getting divorced. So as we look at the value of the business, we have to look at it and see what are the real expenses, what are the actual expenses against the gross revenues, what is the expected business, and not only that, but you got to look at something else too. It's not just a question of, well, we look at what the business makes and we look at what it spends. If it makes the same as it spends, it's worthless. That's what some people say, but not really, because you got to realize one thing. If the business is such that it will pay, let's say, the husband his salary in perpetuity, he has the expectation that he will be able to make a living from this business, even if the business doesn't have profits, because all the money for his salary is eating up all the profits. But that business still has a value because it's going to support him indefinitely. And indefinite support is certainly something that it has a value to it. It's something that is worth looking into as we divide up the assets. We're not just going to say, oh, well, he keeps the business because it's worthless. The calculation is way more sophisticated than that. So when we talk about determining what do we do with the business, of course we have to divide up the marital portion of the business. The key is, how do we figure out what that is? Different business evaluators will tell you that there's different ways to look at a business, you know, from the cash value of the business to the book value to the amount of the expected business growth and expectation that will come in future years, bringing that to present day value. In other words, there's all sorts of ways that a business can be evaluated, but the short answer to the question is, what do we do about a business? We're going to evaluate that like any other asset. We're going to look at its value and divide it. How we get to the value, different story and a little bit more complicated. And it's certainly something that we can delve into perhaps at another time. But the brief analysis is, if it's a business that was either started during the marriage or continues ongoing during the marriage and supports the marriage, it is certainly something that's going to be in play when we evaluate the worth of marital assets. Now, if you have any questions about that, reach out. We'll be glad to help you out.